I'm no good at taking good advice, and I'm self-careless, so don't tell me twice that lately I've been so stuck in my head that I forget just about everything my therapist said. Maybe I'm self-helpless.
Hey everyone, welcome to Self-Helpless. I'm Delanie Fischer, and today I'm chatting with Sam Laura Brown, who is the host of the podcast The Perfectionism Project and founder of Perfectionists Getting Shit Done. And although Sam specializes in working with entrepreneurs and business owners around perfectionism, the stuff that we are talking about today is applicable to everybody. So we are simply using entrepreneurship as an example throughout the conversation to discuss how to work with perfectionistic tendencies, but you can plug this into your personal life, your hobbies, your job, parenting, etc., anything that makes sense for you. Perfectionism is considered a personality trait. I think it's important to distinguish the difference between healthy or adaptive perfectionism and unhealthy or maladaptive perfectionism. We're not saying that anybody who is excited to do things at a high standard or your goal to achieve excellence at something is a problem. It's not for everybody. So adaptive perfectionism, it can involve, setting high standards and striving for excellence, but you have flexibility. You are less critical in your approach to making mistakes or having unmet expectations. On the other end of the spectrum, maladaptive perfectionism is marked by unrealistic expectations, really intense self criticism, and having a hard time adapting or accepting setbacks. Maybe you have also high standards for other people, and it's even caused relationship issues for you. Maybe you find you have a heightened sensitivity to judgment or criticism, and that has been holding you back. If you are overwhelmed by everything there is to do and you're struggling to keep up with your current to do list, it just feels never ending. You wake up feeling behind already before you even start your day. You feel guilty when you rest. Even when you take a break, you just can't mentally switch off and enjoy yourself. And you are constantly finding yourself thinking about the things that you should be doing. You catch yourself in different traps like procrastinating or procrastinating, right? There's something important that you really want to do for your health or your work or your family, whatever it is. And you get stuck in organizing a drawer or something that doesn't need to be organized, or you really want to start a new hobby and you find yourself doing hours and hours of research and you never actually start the hobby. You find yourself either over preparing for something to the point of absolute exhaustion or you leave things until the last minute. And either way, it's very draining. And you're finding like you can't rely on yourself to follow through. Everything takes longer than it should. And there's this underlying sense and awareness that you feel like you are not living up to your potential. You are frustrated because you know that you are the one getting in your own way of doing things. And maybe you even compare yourself to other people who seem to be able to effortlessly follow through on stuff, or they're able to do things imperfectly and not ruminate on it the way that you do. So, the perfectionism that we're talking about today is the one that is leaning towards maladaptive. You're overthinking, you're procrastinating, you're burning out consistently. You have this fear of judgment. So you're people pleasing and you are just sick of this over functioning that you're doing because you don't feel like you're actually getting anywhere. This conversation has forever changed the way that I look at procrastination and burnout. Sam shares a reason for procrastination that I've never heard before, and it makes so much sense. So, anyway, we are talking about how perfectionists need to plan differently for themselves. She's also giving us an overview on what she calls power planning, which is a method that she developed based on her own need to work with her perfectionistic tendencies in order to help her actually get shit done, the things that are meaningful and impactful in her life and her work, instead of tending to this never ending to do list of shoulds that so many of us have, and then how to actually apply it to your schedule, your calendar, your day to day, and then how to actually audit and adjust things along the way as you become more aware of what works for you and what doesn't. She also gives a very helpful tip on something that you can screenshot today that will help you immensely figure out what's working and what is not working for you. And perhaps the most important component that we talk about is the concept of clean rest. This is really the key to productivity with the stuff that actually matters to you. And it's also the key to enjoying our time with reduced guilt or no guilt at all. So, if you want to become more present and less ruminating, and oh my gosh, there is a bug in my bra. Oh my, 1 second. And I'm going to keep this in because I'm working on my perfectionism. We're keeping this in, you guys. Okay, he's out. He's out safely. I have saved his life from being suffocated in my cleavage. All right, where was I? Yes, being more present. This is presence right here, baby. Sam is sharing why clean rest is really this driving force of helping us with everything that I just mentioned. So I know from the title of this episode, or even just sharing the things that I did, this topic may seem kind of surface level, like, okay, cool, we're going to learn about a new productivity tool. But you will hear that this stuff goes way deeper than that. I mean, there are usually very significant feelings that we are avoiding when we use busyness as a coping mechanism. As Sam says, it helps us underfeel. So this episode is not just about scheduling your week and, fitting more things on your list. It's actually about addressing things that are keeping you stuck or fearful and reflecting a more honest version of yourself in what you actually do with your time. And Sam actually opens up about a big breakthrough that she had with her own perfectionism regarding the loss of her mother at a young age. This was a really powerful realization. So, those of you tuning in who have lost a loved one as a kid, you may really resonate with this, especially if you are currently experiencing a perfectionist mindset that does not feel good. So, here is my conversation with Sam Laura Brown. What can a perfectionistic mindset look like when it comes to approaching your goals? Because some people might not even think this applies to them. So, how can it kind of come up?
Yeah, 100%. I didn't realize I was a perfectionist when I
Mm,
was because of all the misconceptions around it. So, to answer your question about like what perfectionism is, what I've noticed from my own experience, but also now coaching hundreds of perfectionist entrepreneurs, is really 5 signs of perfectionism that come up and manifest in different ways. But ultimately, it's all with the guys to not let anyone else see that we are imperfect. The misconception is that perfectionists are the people who actually manage to be perfect. They're neat, they're organized, they're highly detail oriented, and some perfectionists are like that. But I didn't fall into that category. And a lot of it is just about wanting to not be seen as imperfect rather than actually being trying to be perfect. So, overthinking, procrastination, burnout, all or nothing thinking, and fear of judgment or people pleasing are the 5 signs. And a lot of that is really just about, for example, with procrastination, this is such a common one,
mm,
that there's that fear of like, if I don't procrastinate and I actually try my hardest, it won't be good enough,
right.
especially if I did it ahead of time rather than at the last minute. So I'll either leave it to the last minute or do a whole lot of productive procrastination, like procrastinating your office or things like that,
I am a
procrastinating.
procrastinator. Yes, that is me to a T.
Yeah, because it just creates this excuse essentially, and not because we're not ambitious or like wanting to do well, but it just feels very vulnerable as a perfectionist to give something your full effort, especially if you believe you're a smart person, you've been praised for being smart, you're a hard worker, all of that kind of thing, that it just feels very vulnerable emotionally to give something your all. And then if that fails, you can't say, oh, well, I would have done better if I tried harder or if I hadn't been so busy with all these other things. To just say, like, I really tried my best and I failed feels like such a blow. So we just add in all of this, like overthinking, just like all these different things so that we never have to fully feel to blame, even though perfectionists obviously self blame a lot. So there's a lot of
Right.
irony with that as well.
And have you found, because you've worked with so many different people on this issue, have you found that, at its core, is it anything that kind of happened within childhood where maybe they were shamed for making mistakes? Or I know societally we don't like people failing and making mistakes, but is there a few things going on that you usually figure out with somebody's fear around this?
Yeah. So the way that I support people and as a coach, how I do this is looking at how your present day thoughts are creating your present day perfectionist tendencies. So it's not necessary, and a lot of perfectionists love it, of like, I need to get to the root. You don't actually need to, but sometimes it can be really helpful to just understand essentially why you really want to avoid shame so much, because perfectionism is all about trying to avoid feeling shame. And typically there is a shameful experience in childhood where something happened and then it's deciding, I never want to feel that way again. And then having that perfectionism be a way to protect against feeling that shame.
Right.
And it doesn't do a great job of that, but we try our best. And also it can serve in childhood as well. But I will say, when it comes to different childhood experiences, that sometimes it can be something that is potentially, like, to the outside eyes, something that would be like, oh, that would be a really hard experience to go through. And then other things, it might just be like a teacher said a comment that no one else would even blink an eye at, but then you felt ashamed and then decided, oh my God, I'm never going to actually like let anyone else see my true creativity again because of what the teacher said or getting laughed at. So it can be just such a range of experiences that have us decide it's not safe to feel shame and I never want to feel that way again. And then have those perfectionist protection mechanisms go up. So I just wanted to say that, because sometimes people are like, but I had a happy childhood or things like that. And it's just about understanding it's just all humans, we experience shame. And I'd say most humans to some degree have these perfectionist tendencies because it feels so uncomfortable to feel shame, which is this like fear of disconnection and not being loved and not belonging. And like we're wired as humans to be in that belief that like belonging and love and connection are what creates survival. So it feels so risky to be disconnected or to think about not belonging or not being loved. So it's like normal to have those perfectionist thoughts and perfectionist tendencies, but a lot of times we just haven't actually updated our thinking when we've then gone to being an adult and we are in a different situation circumstantially, that we're just still holding this fear of feeling ashamed, when actually shame isn't that painful when we actually get present to it as an emotion.
Absolutely. And I know that I've made some big strides, but I would just notice that there was definitely a link for me with overworking as well. Because not only was I avoiding certain things because I didn't want to feel vulnerable, but I just was taking way too long to do certain things. Like I would notice a coworker maybe takes 2 minutes to send the same email that takes me 20 because I was looking for typos and rereading. So have you noticed that that is a pattern as well? Compulsive or like workaholism?
Yeah. So like a lot of those 5 signs probably all contributed to that. So the overthinking you mentioned about the task itself,
Yeah.
procrastinating on hitting send as well. Probably also there was higher level like procrastination on even doing certain things in the first place. The burnout that comes from feeling inadequate and therefore having to quadruple check the exact wording and reading and rereading it. The people pleasing, like the fear of judgment of like this needs to be perfect so that everyone likes me or so I can keep my job, and like all of that kind of thing, which is also exhausting, hence the burning out as well. And that all or nothing mindset of it being really hard for perfectionists, learning the difference between optimal and sufficient. And our perfectionist brain just wants to do everything in the optimal way.
Yeah.
And we therefore don't even do a lot of things at all sufficiently, because it's such a high standard to be optimal or like perfect at everything, that we feel like, well, I can't even ever live up to that. So I won't even try at all. Or I will do it if there's a boss keeping me accountable, if there's an external deadline keeping me accountable, but definitely overworking, like the kind of people that I work with don't tend to be like, I'm sitting around doing nothing. It's people who are really doing a lot of that overworking and overfunctioning, like the busy work, productive procrastination, just like trying so hard to be successful, but then also being so scared of being seen to try and to not be successful that it just becomes so busy. And then there's the exhaustion, and that creates this fear of burnout, and like there's all of that going on. And I teach my clients and practice clean rest, which is resting without guilt. It's such an essential skill mindset for perfectionists to learn. It's also not very appealing to perfectionists, including myself, because we're like, I don't need to rest. Like I'm behind. I need to be busy doing
Ooh.
things. So it's like having the clean rest is a practical tool that really helps to just like untangle all of that, just wanting to get validation from being productive and being successful and like being on that treadmill forever. So it makes you more successful to have the clean rest and to actually do that. But it is a hard sell
Oh
typically
my
to perfectionists
gosh.
because they're like, I don't want to rest. I'm behind. I can't
Yes.
rest.
It does make sense that it could be this mixture of shame and also praise for, success
Yeah.
and failure that contributes to it, to where somebody might be thinking, well, I didn't feel like I was shamed for making mistakes, but maybe they were so praised for doing well all the time. They're afraid not to do well, and that could be driving it. So I think a lot of people might dismiss their own perfectionism thinking, well, I wasn't shamed by a teacher or a parent or this. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I know that, I mean, my early and mid 20s, I was just busy just to be busy. I would have never ending to-do lists. I would, jump out of bed and try to check as many things off of my to-do list as humanly possible without
Mm-hmm.
actually thinking about, is this adding to my life in any way? I just remember like one of the things on my to-do list would be, organize this drawer, for whatever reason. And it's like, okay, it's not adding to my health. It's not helping my business or growth in any way. Why do I care that this drawer might be messy? So what does like the perfectionism, what can that look like in somebody's day to day? Maybe it's like a giant to-do list that you're never going to get done. Like,
Yeah.
how does this show up in people's schedules and time management?
Yeah. The general vibe is should. I should do this. I should do that. I have to. I must. Like, there's a lot of that kind of internal language. It's not even anyone's like, you have to do this. It's just this self-imposed, like, again, with the optimal versus sufficient thing. Like, here's what would be absolutely optimal is basically if I'm a robot and I'm able to do all of these things perfectly. And then it just becomes this quiet expectation that we enforce on ourselves that I have to, it's not even like an option anymore. It's like the bare minimum is that I'm performing at an optimal level. And also
Yeah,
just with things like organizing the drawer, perfectionists typically, we love that kind of thing because it gives this sense of control. Like, even though
right.
you might be procrastinating on the project you need to do that's really important, or starting a business or whatever that is, at least I can get my drawer organized. It's very like a contained task. And then sometimes, of course, we procrastinate on that because then if we did that, then we'd have to do something else that's scary because now we're organized. So we have to take the next steps. So there's all of like that going on. But a lot of times it is very common to have these kind of like self-soothing, control-oriented tasks that also make it onto the to-do list because it creates this sense of calm of like, I feel out of control and inadequate, but at least I can organize
Ooh,
my drawer and
yes. And
have
it,
that done and have that completion feeling and
yes.
feel successful at something because I don't feel successful at anything else, but I can feel successful at organizing all my makeup in my drawer and all my toiletries and have that be done. So we like try and
Yeah.
get those needs met for feeling successful and feeling a sense of progress and feeling a sense of certainty through those kinds of tasks that from the outside, it's like objectively, it probably doesn't need to be done. But just emotionally, we're like, but I need to feel successful at something. So I will have it be this smaller contained thing that also is low stakes. Like, it's not going to impact your like finances or like your employability or anything like that. So
Right.
we like to also have a lot of that. For myself, I had a mixture of like being praised for being smart and intelligent. And of course, it makes sense when you learn as a child. And it's not even that this is being said, but essentially, you are loved because you are smart and doing things right.
Mm.
That we then, it becomes very scary to be seen to make mistakes, to be seen even by ourselves to be unintelligent and things like that. And I also had personal experiences as well. My mom died when I was 11 from breast cancer. And
Mm.
as a child, I made that mean like a shameful thing, essentially, that she had left me or that I hadn't been good enough for her to stay alive. Like, it doesn't actually make
Wow.
sense as an adult. Objectively, she didn't
Wow.
die from cancer because I wasn't well behaved.
Right.
But in a child's mind, we draw those kinds of conclusions. And then we just bring those stories into adulthood. And it wasn't until I was 27 and actually was like, why can I not speak about her without crying?
Mm.
Could that be grief? Probably some unprocessed grief in there. But it was like such a breakthrough when I realized it was shame. Like I felt ashamed for having been left. And then I was like, oh, and that makes no sense. Now I can look at it as an adult.
Wow.
So there's a lot of people will also have something like that where there's something that has happened that they have just as a child drawn a conclusion that didn't actually fit the situation. But of course, as a child, you don't have the same emotional abilities, the same intellectual abilities that you do as an adult. Of course, conclusions are drawn like that. But then so often we just bring those conclusions unexamined into adulthood, and they're just silently running things in the background. And for me to be like, oh, that's shame, and that shame makes no sense, was such a release. I can now talk about her like without having that like emotional response, which was shame. And then from doing that, I was then able to process grief that I had because there wasn't this shame on top of the grief.
What a huge realization to have. Something
Yeah.
that like to an outsider, you would not even think those two are connected.
Yeah.
Your mom passing away and having shame, that does not compute, like you said, as an adult. What brought you to that moment of realization of shame about this?
Yeah. Nothing really was like, hey, this is why. But I slowly
Yeah.
started to piece it together to just hear people share stuff like this, which is why I love sharing it. And I
Yeah.
remember as well, I was on a walk and I was listening to a podcast, and someone shared that they had had a parent pass away and they felt ashamed about that. And I
Mm.
was like, just, I was met, like, I'd had so many other different epiphanies as well that when I heard that, I was like, that is 100% it for me. But
Wow.
I'd never heard anyone else say, as you said, it like it doesn't seem connected because as an adult, it doesn't seem like a logical conclusion to draw. But it is common for children who have had parents die that they feel ashamed about that. Because for me, it meant in that situation, I was now different to everyone, that everyone else, so to speak, of course, people are in all different situations in reality. But in my mind as a child, everyone else had a mom, but I didn't anymore. And then that created separation and like, now I don't fit in anymore. And like when everyone's doing their Mother's Day card, I'm not, like, there's all of that kind of like subtle, the subtle things that happen around it. People don't want to talk about it because they don't know what to say.
Right.
And then as a child, you interpret that as like, there's something wrong with me because people don't even want to mention it.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I really appreciate you sharing that. It makes a lot of sense, that perspective as a kid. And you mentioned something about the like the procrastinating with kind of those quick dopamine hits, that
Yeah.
you can kind of get when you're
Yeah.
procrastinating. And it almost made me realize that I had maybe an unhealthy relationship to maybe adrenaline when I was like at my height of perfectionism. And I know for me, a big moment I had recently that made me realize kind of how far I've come out of the perfectionism stuff. It's not perfect. But my friend and I published a book, and towards the end, I was like kind of tired. I'm like, you know what? There's probably going to be typos in here, and that's okay. And sure enough,
Mhm.
we got the book, and there's some typos in there, and it didn't bother me. And I was floored because old me would have been ruminating on that for weeks and weeks.
Mm.
So if you could maybe share a little bit about what it can look like to start coming out of the perfectionism and what that might look like in your day to day.
When I started to realize I was a perfectionist, or like I actually just had, I thought, a motivation issue because I knew what to do and I couldn't get myself to do it. So I have a law degree and a finance degree. Like I studied and did the good, right thing to do, which is
Mm,
get
yeah.
highly educated. So I did that. And while I was doing that, I started a blog. I'd come across a personal development book that my brother had recommended called The Go Giver, which is great. Had the idea this is 2013, to start my own blog, just sharing like, here's my personal development journey, like things that I'm learning. I didn't yet have any opinions, any tools, anything at all. It was just like me sharing, like, I liked this YouTube video. I
Yeah.
liked this article by this person. And the perfectionism that came up was undeniable. I was so debilitated, but I was like, personal development is the thing that I want to talk about, but also I feel like I don't have any expertise. Like it felt so vulnerable to share it, but it felt like me. And this is very
Mm,
common as well with a lot of artists, writers, all of those people also experience perfectionism because when it's such a true expression of yourself, that feels more vulnerable. And then we tend to bring in those protection mechanisms. Getting a law degree wasn't me. Getting a finance degree wasn't me. That was things that I was doing that I was interested in, but it didn't feel as vulnerable to fail at that as it did to actually be like showing up as a real me and having people laugh at me. And so when I started, I finally, after 6 months of like listening to people, got the courage to actually start my own blog. And then I completely ghosted it for 3 months. Not to mention, I, of course, hadn't told anyone in my real life about it. When people were like, tell your friends and family to follow you. Like, no, thank you. There is no way in hell I'm telling anyone in my real life about this, because of the fear I had of being laughed at. I was like, I'm just going to have to shut the whole thing down if anyone finds out about it. And then finally I was like, okay, I can maybe write one post. And then I posted it, and then I edited it. And I edited it again. I still hadn't told anyone. I was just like editing something that was already published. And a lot of people were like, and I struggled for 2 more months and then I had success. Not my story. It was like 3 years before, 3 years before I even had the courage to sell anything, all the while trying to solve for like, what is this motivation issue? Because I'm a hard worker, like I'm an intelligent person, but I keep having these ideas of like things I want to post, but then I stop myself from posting it. Or I'm like, what is it that I'm so scared to tell anyone in my life about it? And I have really supportive people in my life that, even if they don't get it, would probably be like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. That I was like, what is that about? And trying to just like start piecing together, like, what is happening with this? Because when I was in the context of doing the smart, responsible thing that everyone else does, where when you're studying or you're working, so I then went on to work in accounting during this time as well. You have clearly defined, here's what success looks like. Right. Here's the path that you're on. If you put in this many hours, you'll get paid this amount. Like, it's very clear. Whereas in entrepreneurship, there's this extra uncertainty. There isn't clarity of like, just do this and then you'll definitely have this result. It brings up a lot of that. Like, I had all the overthinking, the procrastination was just like, I was working hard, like objectively from the outside, instead of studying, I was writing stuff, but I wouldn't post it. I'd be busy creating a graphic, take me 5 hours to do that. And like, it's all of that kind of stuff that I was burned out emotionally just from like trying to get myself to do anything, so scared of anyone finding anything out, like just in the all or nothing of like, I'd start posting consistently and then I'd stop doing it for months. And then I'd start again. So there was like, the way I like to describe it is like withholding giving a full effort, because there's that fear of like, if I actually went fully all in and just created the graphics quickly and had it go out, not only would I be having to be seen to be imperfect in the journey of that, but just like this being able to be like, well, if I wasn't so busy with my health goals, and if I wasn't this and if I wasn't that, then I'd be more successful. So there's all of that that goes into it. And we do that whilst working very hard, which is where it gets really frustrating, because most perfectionists, how this manifests is that you are working so damn hard and yet you're just spinning your wheels and not feeling like you're making progress. And so to contrast it with where I am today, I still have perfectionism that I'm working on overcoming. I call it like your perfectionism handbrake, and you're just learning to release that. It's not like a perfectionist or a recovering perfectionist. I tend not to use that term. I don't think it is helpful to think about perfectionism as like this bad disease almost that I have to recover from. It's like, it's actually just a way of thinking, and you can just like create safety for yourself to not be in that thinking, and to be instead in the growth mindset where you actually believe that it's better to have tried and failed than to have never tried at all. People think with like the growth mindset that if you love personal development, you're growth minded, and that is just not the case. Growth mindedness isn't about how much you love listening to this kind of podcast. It's about being able to actually not just intellectually understand, but believe that you are capable of becoming more intelligent, more skilled, and that you can actually improve through effort. Whereas a perfectionist will be like understanding that, but their actions will say it's better to not try than it is to fail. I'm not actually going to improve or capable of improving. So my first attempt has to be perfect, because that's as good as it will ever get. Therefore, I need all my ducks in a row. I need to have everything perfectly organized before I can even start, because I'm not actually going to improve. How I began is how I will end, and it will be getting worse, not getting better. But in that growth mindset, where we actually are in the belief of like effort is valuable in and of itself. And people know this intellectually. Like people talk about it all the time, like success is built on a pile of failures and all of that. A perfectionist is like, yeah, but I don't want to fail. I can't let myself fail. That's just going to be too shameful. So I have to build my success on a pile of successes. And that feels way too hard. So I'm just going to pretend I don't even have this dream at all. I don't know what to do with my life when like, you know, 100% what to do. It's just scary to do it.
Right. And even if you don't have a huge vision of what you want to do, you at least know like the next step or two. Like you got that little inkling, something's nudging you. So why do perfectionists have to plan differently? And maybe you can give us kind of a snapshot or an overview of what power planning is and how that method that you've created works.
Yeah. So I developed power planning just from my own selfish needs that I had of I love being productive. I love feeling successful. I love making progress. And I was just finding that when I was working off a to-do list that of course would be like a million miles long and just get longer throughout my day. Or I tried like time blocking and I just completely overschedule myself, fall behind, not look at my calendar, like just forget to look at it. And then just try and be more motivated the next time. Like I basically had tried every productivity method I could and was just kind of like, I know I'm capable of getting shit done and yet I'm not. And what is that about? So what I started doing was really just like piecing together all the different things I had learned. And I am an avid personal development fan and like learning all the different things. And I just started taking like, okay, this bit works for me. But then if I do that, that puts me in an all or nothing mindset where I just end up abandoning the plan. And this bit works for me. But then if I do that bit, then I end up just in a thought pattern that burns me out. So like, how can I piece it together? So I started being like, I want to plan from a calendar. I want to have a lot of clarity about what I'm doing, but not the overwhelm or the overscheduling, really around the premise of like, okay, yes, I would love to be more motivated and disciplined. There's things I can do to be like that. But also, what if I just actually worked with the brain that I have currently? And then I can change because I want to, not because I have to in order to get anything done. And when I started, the same way with that breakthrough that I had about my mum passing away, that I was like, oh, it's not me that's the problem. Actually, it was just this interpretation I had as a child that actually now objectively doesn't make sense. So when I had a similar realization with productivity of like, oh, it's actually just this doesn't work for my brain.
Right.
And I just actually need to have a different way of planning. And this is the same as well with people with ADHD as well, being like, oh, actually, I could just learn to work with myself. And power planning as well, because I know there's a lot of people, a lot of perfectionists who also experience ADHD, that it's like all of this that I'm talking about also supports that executive function and has you working with yourself, not just from a perfectionism perspective, but also anything else going on with your brain, what season of life you're in, what season, if you have a business or if you're studying or doing other things, like where that's at. It's really just all about like, how about instead of trying to be more motivated or more disciplined or better or have the perfect 5 a.m. morning routine, how about I just actually have a system that helps me support myself and trust myself and follow through and increase my capacity at the same time to do things and have me actually feel successful at the end of the week instead of feeling like I got nothing done, and have me feeling like I know exactly what to do instead of the overwhelm of like, I don't even know where to start. Everything feels so important. I already feel so far behind. Hence, I'm just going to clean my office.
That feeling of waking up and you already feel behind, I do not miss that feeling. That was truly the worst. And it's amazing once you're able to prioritize what actually matters to you versus what you were doing, like you mentioned, because you thought you should for whatever reason. It's amazing the space that can open up. You know, you do feel like you maybe have a little bit more time to do things, or it just feels a little bit more simple. I think you say something like you follow through on your goals 80% of the time. You're following through, but there is that kind of wiggle room and flexibility that you do not have to be perfect. Can we talk a little bit about that concept a bit?
Yeah. So the premise you're talking about is 80% follow through. It's kind of similar to like with healthy eating, where it's like eat healthy about 80% of the time, 20% of the time, eat whatever you want, instead of eat perfectly 100% of the time. And then if you have a donut because a colleague has a going away party, then just go back to eating completely unhealthy things. Like in Atomic Habits, James Clear, in that book that's very popular, talks about like, having this 2-day rule of like, you never break a streak for more than 2 days. That really triggers the perfectionist all or nothing mindset to have a rule like that. Instead of actually, if you miss 4 days, just pick it back up. Like it's not this like, oh, I can't trust myself to miss more than 2 days or it's shot. It's like, actually, I could just develop the ability to have wiggle room, to make adjustments, to trust myself, to keep going, to not make it a big deal. So with power planning, there's the power hour, which is a process to plan out your week in a way that is actually workable, that isn't overscheduled. And yeah, like the people I work with and me, like have a lot we want to get done. And it's not that everything fits in the calendar. So it's figuring out, because people be like, how do I fit my whole to-do list in there? And the issue with your to-do list, one of them, is there's so many things on there that don't even need to happen in the first place. So the goal isn't like, let's put your to-do list with all of these shoulds and musts and have tos and all different levels of priority into your calendar so you can do them. It's actually having a system which includes scheduling and planning and clean rest before you schedule your work time. Having those boundaries is really powerful to do. And then you solve for, okay, if this is the goal I have, how do I accomplish that in this amount of time, instead of I'll see how long it takes. So you plan out your week in a really supportive way that you actually can follow through on, even when you're not perfect. And follow through 80% of the time is the aim. The second step is having little tweaks in your calendar. So throughout the week, you're just constantly making adjustments to your calendar to reflect what actually happened. So if you didn't do something at all because you procrastinated on it, that's fine. You just delete that and put whatever you did do instead. It can be very illuminating and
it's like a little audit. Yeah.
So especially for my clients who love personal development, like they're willing to have that kind of mirror to see like what's going on, and to learn how to review that without shame or like beating themselves up. But you then have your calendar. It's kind of like if you're driving to a destination and there's roadworks or there's a car crash and you have a map, the map will reroute of, okay, turn this way instead so we can still get there, instead of like, oh, I guess I'm going home now because there's been a car crash and like I couldn't possibly drive on any other road. It's like, well, there's probably a lot of other options to get there. It might take a little bit longer, or it might not look exactly as you thought. Sometimes it looks a lot better. You're like, oh, I hadn't actually realized this scenic route was even here and I was driving on the highway. It's the same amount of time. Like there's those benefits that come as well from adjustments. It's not just like compensating for not being good. It's actually a lot of times you'll make adjustments because you see a better plan than when you had planned it out initially. But you make adjustments and you have your calendar reflect what you actually, roughly speaking, got done. And then everything gets a check mark. So you're still getting that like dopamine hit of checking things off. I love that.
Yes.
Still, a to-do list has a time and a place, but really when you want to be productive, it's much better to have this kind of approach. And then at the end of the week, you do a weekly review, which is reflecting on what really worked well, because we perfectionists tend to just be like, nothing worked. I'm so behind. I'm like, I'm not good enough. And so you have to train your brain to really see like what is working for you, what isn't, and what you're going to adjust next time. And to not have it be this like that's a full day of reviewing, of just like, I just want to have one insight into each of those things that I can implement. So then the next week, when you're planning, you're not just trying to be more motivated or more disciplined and having the same kind of plan. If you're like, actually, it worked really well for me to start my workday at 11 a.m. instead of trying to start at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
So next week, I'm going to plan to start at 11 a.m. I'm going to let myself have a slow morning and I'm going to reflect on how that goes. And I'm actually going to, instead of just being like, here's what you should do, you should wake up at 5 a.m. For me, I love, and now I have little kids, so it's adjusted slightly, but typically like I love waking up early, and you don't have to like waking up at a particular kind of time. It's just like figuring out what really works for you. And then in the weekly review, because you have an updated version of what actually happened, and you take a screenshot of your calendar at the beginning of the week after you planned, you can just see side by side, here's what I planned, here's what actually ended up happening. What things do I like that I changed? What things am I like, oh, actually, I'm not loving the reason for that, so that each week you aren't just trying harder, you're actually getting more skilled and you're actually shifting into that growth mindset. What it actually looks like now for me, I'm so much more willing to be seen, to put myself out there, to let things be easy is a massive one. Perfectionists really have a hard time with ease.
Yeah.
Letting things be easy. I work much less and am much more successful than when I was working like all day, every day, hiding. Like I
Right.
was so busy, but not actually showing up. So there becomes that real shift in that. But my favorite of it all is the self-trust, is that like my relationship with myself is so much more supportive. I don't talk to myself like shit when I have a hard day or when I didn't do something that I would have liked to have done. I'm actually able to, instead of being like, oh, I should have done that or I should have done that, to just objectively support myself and be like, okay, we've learned next time in that situation, I'm going to do this differently, instead of the shame spiral that I used to have. It becomes like with any relationship, you kind of just have this status quo of how you operate. It just becomes so comfortable to beat yourself up. Even though we hate it, it becomes like, oh yeah, that's how I'm used to being treated. That's how I treat myself. It's like, well, you're talking to yourself all day anyway. You're just
Yeah.
so used to saying bad things to yourself that it feels so foreign to even say something else to yourself. But you already know how to talk to yourself. And it's not like, okay, just start thinking this different thing over time, just as you are doing power planning and clean rest and other things that support you practically getting into that mindset, the self-talk just begins to shift. And so it's not that I never beat myself up mentally or any of that. It's just night and day compared to when I started. I feel so much more on my side, that I so much more have my own back. And that gives me so much more courage to do things and be out in the world and to make mistakes, because I'm not fearing that future me is going to shame me for it.
I love this approach so much because you're basically showing yourself who you actually are and working
Mm,
with that, and you're accepting
mm,
that and then
mhm.
prioritizing based on that. It was very freeing for me to realize I don't actually want to be this person who's busy constantly. I don't want to be
Yeah.
doing 10 things at once. I'm somebody who really only enjoys like 2 to 3 main things a day. And then
Mhm.
it became so clear what's actually important to me. If I can't do 10 things a day, what are the 3 things that are important? And it's kind of this relief in a way of I actually know what I want versus I am kind of just confused in this jumbled mess of busyness. Could we talk a little bit about clean rest and what clean rest is,
Mhm.
what it isn't? You also mentioned it's the first thing that you schedule.
Yeah. So clean rest is something that, and I mean, I think most people listening will be like, I've heard about the idea that like you should rest or whatever. And as I said, it was always such a hard sell for me. I was like, "Psh, for other people, I don't actually need to rest. I'm so far behind. And I also like really enjoy working. I really enjoy being productive. So it's like, I don't even actually have this desire for rest. That, and of
Oh,
course I didn't, because when you attach your lovability to productivity, of course you're not going to have much desire for not being productive. So,
ooh, yeah.
but it was all this like, well, I love working, I love what I'm doing in terms of like trying to figure out how to build this business. And what I actually decided to do, and this would have been at the time based on like different things that I'd heard, but I'm like, I need to just frame it for myself, like what would actually be appealing to me, was like, if I could think about rest as something that would help me be productive, then I would actually probably try and do it. If
Mm,
I hear that it's going to not help me be productive, I have no interest. But also, like, how could I experiment with that in my own life and just see what happened? So, at the time when I first started doing what is now called clean rest, it was 2014. I was a university student still. And I just noticed that I felt so guilty all the time because I should be studying and I wasn't. No matter what I did, even if it was like catching up with friends and family, then I'm feeling resentful because it's taking time away from study. Then
ah,
I'd go to study and I'd procrastinate. I wouldn't use the time well. Like I just was like constantly in this state of feeling guilty because I'm not doing something else, no matter what I was doing. So, what I started doing as a university student was, okay, instead of me just being like, well, I'll study on the weekend, oh, I'll study on Monday, I'll study on Tuesday, like, you know how it goes when you just,
yeah.
it's always going to be tomorrow. It's like, I'm not allowed to study on the weekend at all. Even if there's something massive going on that I need to study for, like, that's off limits, even if I have nothing to do. But also, what I love doing, and this is coming back to what you were saying about like connecting with yourself and like seeing yourself. I love going to the beach and reading. And I'm in Brisbane, Australia. I live about an hour away from really nice beaches. And I was like, I'm going to go to the beach every weekend over the summer, just by myself, just to sit there and read a book, because I enjoy doing that. And that's something I do on my ideal day, but I'm too far behind now to do that. But I'm actually going to say, this is something that I want to have part of my life. I'm going to do that on the weekend, and I'm not going to do any study. And I just noticed such a massive shift in like not only my mental clarity throughout the week, because I wasn't so exhausted from the guilt.
Right.
That I had so much more energy when I was studying, because my brain, it's not even like physical rest, like go to the spa or read a book or sit on the beach. Because now in my life, during my clean rest time, I'm looking after my 3 little ones. I'm pregnant currently with my 4th, who's due in a few weeks.
Oh, wow.
So I'm not like in this kind of like, I'm just sitting around doing nothing all day. But clean rest is about your brain and what's happening in your brain. And are you feeling guilty? It's not to say every time you rest, you're going to feel like amazing and all these happy feelings. Sometimes what's going to come up is emotions to be processed that aren't going to feel great. If you stop being so busy all the time, things will come up. Hence why we want to be busy all the time, because we don't have to feel if we're busy. So
Yes.
I just want to be clear about that, because people are like, oh, I still feel like I don't feel amazing in my clean rest. Yeah, but you will feel like a human, and the full spectrum of that. And it's just about being able to mentally switch off and get out of the like, I should be doing something different to what I am doing right now, and say, this is when I'm working, or studying or whatever it is. I'm going to solve for how to get the results I want in that time frame, which might mean I need to do less overthinking, which might mean I need to trust myself more, which might mean I need to stop overcomplicating the very simple task and send the email in 2 minutes instead of 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So there's that. And it's much more tolerable for us to do that when we have a light at the end of the tunnel, which is I'm going to be able to rest. Because of the way our brains are wired, we are wired to conserve energy and to not actually expend any unnecessary energy in case like a saber-toothed tiger comes along and we have to run away. So and this is what a lot of perfectionists do, if you have a productive day, you add more to the list. You try to like capitalize on it. And I am all in with working in alignment with yourself, in flow. Like I love all of that kind of thing. But it's really important to not be in this like, when you're productive, you then penalize yourself with more brave things to do or more hard things to do, because then of course your brain is like, I'm going to overthink this, because if I send that email in 2 minutes, you're going to make me send 10 more. Or I could just send one email in 20 minutes. But if I send that one email in 2 minutes, I can have 18 minutes of doing whatever I want. It's so much easier for our brains to be like, okay, I'm willing emotionally to write it and hit send, because I know I'm not going to get penalized for doing this in a highly efficient way, that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that I know actually it's okay to be courageous or brave or put a lot of thought into this thing right now, or do something emotionally hard, because soon rest is coming and I can switch off and I can recharge, and I don't have to be on all the time. I don't have to be in a situation that feels risky all the time. And so a lot of perfectionists, particularly with business, it requires you to do brave things. And if you never have time off, our brains are like, well, when am I going to actually get the reset that I need? Have that emotional time to not have to be in the thick of something risky.
Yeah.
So if you don't have the clean rest, then you end up procrastinating on all the, say, going live on Instagram or just launching something. It just ends up being okay, well, it doesn't feel safe to do that, because if I do that, you'll just make me do something else that's equally as hard. So I need to drag it out, because you're not giving me rest. So I have to give me rest through procrastination, or I have to give me rest through burnout. Very common for people who are I work until everything's done, or until I'm too exhausted to not keep working. That's your way of getting the rest you need, is I will exhaust myself, because only at that point will I give myself permission to have time off, which is also such a damaging relationship with ourselves, but I used to be that person.
Absolutely.
And it's
Revenge
like,
bedtime procrastination. We're like,
yeah,
oh, I only get this time, so I might as well, stay up really late and then be exhausted the next day because I'm not allowing myself to properly rest,
during
throughout
the
the day.
day.
Yeah. Or on
Yeah,
weekends. Yeah, absolutely.
100%. So
Yeah.
it's such a game changer when it comes to not just like being more productive, though it helps so much with productivity. And I just want to lead with that because for a perfectionist, they're like, you need to hear that. But also just the way like everything else transforms. And like I haven't burnt out now in at least 5 years. And I used to like routinely burn myself out because that was the only time I allowed myself to rest. So I had to burn out in order to get that rest.
Mm, yeah.
When I started allowing myself to rest and also became more willing to make mistakes and all of those good things that we hear everyone talking about, when I did the emotional work, like the mindset work, had the tools to support that and actually allow myself to rest, the need to burn myself out dramatically decreased
Mm,
because
mm,
I could rest without guilt and without having to be completely exhausted first. I no longer had this criteria that like it's okay to rest when. It was like, actually, it's okay to rest a lot. And
right.
because of that, I'm getting more work done. And I'm not also holding myself back due to a fear of burning out again, which is a massive one for perfectionists of being like, I'm so scared to go all in because I'll probably burn myself out again.
Oh, yes. There's a few things that you hit on. Like number one, I had a friend share with me recently that they do not like having downtime because when they have free time or downtime, they feel sad. So they keep themselves
Yeah.
busy and they're aware that they're doing that. And it's like, okay, so you will just continue to be busy constantly if you don't figure out what's driving you. So that's a huge one that you hit on. You kind of have to want to slow down a bit or want to maybe reduce the amount of busyness or like I have definitely I catch myself maybe I'm watching TV so I tell myself that I'm resting and relaxing but I'm like opening up my emails on my phone. I'm kind of in between two worlds and I have to
Yeah.
catch myself this probably doesn't qualify as clean rest. You said something else about the time restriction of like once you gave yourself real weekends off that you could not study. I've been doing something recently where I'm actually giving myself less time on purpose to complete tasks
Hmm.
because if I wake up and I say, okay, I have like 4 hours to do these things, I might just mess around for like 2 of those hours. But so
Hmm.
I will just allow myself now to get up, do all the things that I feel like doing in my personal life, whether it's laundry or cooking or, putting the dishes away. And then I will purposely only give myself like maybe an hour and a half to do that thing and I'll actually get it done. So I'm like, wow, I'm getting this done in an hour, hour and a half. It used to take me 4 hours, but I wasn't working those full 4 hours. It still gets done.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's so good
Crazy.
because you're not
Uh,
like, okay, I'm going to try and do more. Because a lot of perfectionists, when they just hear that, they could be thinking, like, okay, that's going to be more pressure and more stress because I'm going to try and cram it in. And what you said instead is like, actually, I'm acknowledging that really this is only a 90-minute task.
yeah.
But because if I tell myself, like, I should be working hard, so I have to work longer hours or whatever, I
Right.
expand it out or just fluff around or do whatever. And so I'm actually just going to get the rest that I'm craving and
Yes.
needing and just let myself be, let myself do whatever I want. I can watch something, I can scroll, I can do whatever without guilt. And then I'm just going to give myself the actual amount of time needed to do the thing and
Right.
do the thing. And that builds so much self trust to be able to operate that way instead of then feeling so bad that you've been procrastinating or working during your work time. And then you also feel bad because you aren't letting yourself actually meet your own personal needs in personal time because you
Mm,
probably don't have really much personal time. And it helps to get out of the belief of, I just need more time. Like if I had more time, I'd be more successful and all of that. And I've done so much work on this myself, particularly in the last 2 years, of where my brain just kept being like, you just need more time. Like you work 3 days a week, you just actually need to work more. I was like, I'm going to solve for the 3 days and I'm going to like have that boundary. So I have to learn that lack of time isn't the problem
right.
and that actually it's more to do with my emotional capacity and what I'm willing to feel and like being able to prioritize and all those things. Now I've recently opened up how I work in it, like in a more kind of fluid, flowy way. But I had to actually learn that lack of time wasn't the issue and adding more time because when I would add more time, I would waste it. I wouldn't use it productively. And that's always a good sign that there's this kind of work to be done. It's like, well, I get the extra day and then I just suddenly, you're overcomplicating something, or like, I just had this idea that I should do this in this much more intricate, time consuming way, or do this other thing I saw this person doing. Or like for me, instead of recording a podcast episode that's an hour long in an hour and 15 minutes to just do the outline and record it took me like 4 hours to record an episode because I just started overthinking it and being like, I need to sound more articulate or whatever. Just actually being able to say like, I'm a human, I need rest. Either I have to acknowledge like the procrastination I'm doing, a big part of that is I'm just needing rest. And because I'm not giving myself that rest, I have to procrastinate in order to get time off. I have to overthink in order to have a bit of a mental break. And so I could actually just outwardly give myself that permission. And then when it's work time, you're able to get shit done because you're not trying to meet all of these personal needs at the same time.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I know that you work with a lot of entrepreneurs, so I'm assuming clean rest for them might be you're not working on the business and that you're giving yourself that like step away, the clean rest to just, enjoy your life or maybe do things around the home or something. Let's say somebody's tuning in, they're not an entrepreneur. What would qualify or kind of disqualify clean rest for them if they're kind of confused about, what it might be look
what
like?
that is.
Yeah.
For sure. So I get this question a lot because we perfectionists like, tell me the right and wrong way to do it.
Can you be a perfectionist about getting clean rest? I'm sure.
So with it, this is how I describe it for business, and then I'll make it applicable to everyone. So for business, it's just there's your business time, and a lot of my clients are like still building their business to being able to be full-time. So they have potentially a full-time job. They maybe have like health condition, they have appointments for, they have kids, like they've got other stuff going on. It's not just like business and then rest time. So whatever your main like productive thing is that you want to be doing, if you have that time and then clean rest, and in clean rest, you might be doing productive things still. You might be like I am taking care of my little ones. You might be doing really boring things. Like it's not about like, okay, you have like a little chunk here for, 30 minutes of reading a book and that's your clean rest. Like defining it's either work/productive time. So whether if someone's like a stay-at-home parent, that would be their like productive time. And I know that we'd have to get nuanced about like distinguishing that out. But having the time with, say, if you have a full-time job, for example, or part-time job, and you could do power planning, for example, with that, then all the other time is clean rest. Instead of like feeling guilty that you're not doing something for your work when you should be, especially if you have the kind of job like maybe a professional job where there might be an expectation that you work extra and things like that. So you can just have clearly defined. But for businesses is so important because people are like, of course you have no boundary between your personal time and your business time. Well, yeah, because no one has taught you how to do that. And you're thinking that I have to always be like working and then I put a load of laundry on, or I'm watching TV and then I'm looking at my email. Like you don't actually have to operate like that. Just because most people do doesn't mean it's the only way. But just having, here's my business time, and then everything else is clean rest. We also have in the method, like you plan in commitments that you have and things like that as well. But just generally, it's just time when you're telling yourself, I'm not allowed to work during that time.
Gotcha.
And it's not going to be like that forever. And you have little tweaks so you can make adjustments. But especially someone starting out with clean rest, because of your lack of desire to rest, because again, it's like at risk and like putting your lovability at risk, that you have to say like, okay, even if I'm twiddling my thumbs all day and feeling so far behind, I'm not going to allow myself to work in the evening or on this day. And I always say, just like have a little bit more clean rest than you feel comfortable with. It's going to look different for everyone. It depends what season of life you're in, what season of business or professional life and all of that. But whatever you feel comfortable with, just add a little bit more than that.
Gotcha.
And that starts to have you then be able to like think about like, well, what do I actually like doing in my spare time is a big question for most perfectionists. I wish I had more time. Now I have it. I don't have any hobbies. What do I do about that? Like, who am I when I'm not working? Or like doing whatever the main productive thing is that you do.
Sure.
And that can be a really confronting question as well. So of course we keep working, and especially if you're like me, but I love working and all of that. Like, yeah, but also just because I love something doesn't mean I should do it 24/7.
Right. Who am I? Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
big one. And so let's say that somebody's been carving out time for their clean rest. They're stepping away from work or whatever their guideline is, but the guilt is rough. Like the guilt is making it not feel
Yeah.
restful. It's feeling like filthy rest with this guilt. How do you help
Yeah.
somebody with the guilt piece of that kind of ruminating? How do
Yeah.
you help them relieve that?
First of all, it's like not having this expectation that like I should be perfectly not guilty or feeling clean or whatever.
Right.
That it's really just about saying, I'm not allowing myself to work, even if I feel guilty. And part of that, like just actually being like, I'm not actually able to, even if I wanted to, removes a lot of that guilt because guilt comes from a thought of I should, or
Right.
essentially I'm doing it wrong because I should be working right now. That for me, for example, with the university studies, that when I started being like, but even if I wanted to study this weekend, I'm not allowing myself to, it removed a lot of that guilt. But there will be feelings that come up, especially for like someone who is doing a lot of overworking. It's a lot of underfeeling that is happening, a lot
Mm,
of emotion that is there that has been typically getting avoided. There are some people who can work a lot from a really growth minded place. There's no issue with the number of hours, but because most people are doing that from a place of trying to escape feelings, that of course, when you take time off, your feelings are going to be there to meet you. And so part of it
absolutely.
is a willingness of like, I might have this clean rest and it's still clean, but it might emotionally feel really hard. It could be guilt, it could be sadness, it could be grief, it could be any number of other feelings
Yeah.
that as a society we get told like, okay, if you're going through a really hard time, keep yourself busy. There is definitely a time and place for that. There's also a time and place for let yourself feel it. Let yourself process the sadness. It might even only take a few days to actually be with it. But especially perfectionists, we're so like used to living in our heads and like being disconnected from our bodies and our feelings that there's this fear as well of like that feeling will swallow me up and I won't be able to get out of it if I let myself feel it. And the more you can just even like in small instances start to let yourself feel your feelings, whether that's crying, whether that's just like tuning into what it physically feels like, the more you can start to realize it's not as like the feeling is less painful than the avoiding of the feeling. And increasing your willingness, like I'm willing to have my weekend off and just feel super sad the whole time for as long as it takes and to get support and all of that kind of thing. But I'm willing to do that, of course, in a safe way. And when that happens, it means your clean rest as well at other times can be a lot more of the positive feelings when you have a willingness to also be with the other sides of yourself and the other side of the emotional spectrum as well. So for a lot of perfectionists, it's not like, oh, now I feel like I'm having a spa retreat every time that I'm having clean rest.
Right.
It's like, oh no, I'm actually like spending time with myself and maybe I'm learning I don't love certain things about myself or I'm
Yeah.
avoiding certain conversations with myself. And not then I need to be better and like I don't love this thing about me so I need to now go on this self-improvement kick. It's like, oh, I actually just have things I need to reconcile or process or let myself actually reframe or feel or get support with. So it does bring up, again, there's so many reasons why we don't like rest as perfectionists. One of them is it requires you to be more connected with yourself. And sometimes that can be really uncomfortable.
I love how incredibly deep this shit is because you might see like, oh, I'm going to learn how to create a schedule for myself. And then you realize it's not about the schedule. I mean, it
Yeah.
is, right? Like the schedule is like this manifestation of what's going on, in your
Yeah.
inner world. And I really love the depth of the work that you do. Is there like a favorite maybe example or two that you have, whether it's yourself or maybe somebody that you've worked with, where they tweaked something very, kind of small that led to a really important result or impact for them throughout the power planning process? Like anything that comes to mind.
I love that question, which I have stolen from Tim Ferriss of like, what would this look like if it was easy? For most of my clients, the key shift is actually changing out the tools they're using instead of like, I need to be better or do it differently. Like, I'm just going to replace the to-do list that actually exacerbates my all or nothing mindset
Yeah.
and overthinking. I'm just going to replace that with something that works for me. And so for a lot of my clients, just shifting out the tools that help naturally support you to think in a better way for your perfectionist brain by changing the tool and also having support to go with it. Those little shifts, instead of just trying harder, being like, actually, I'm not going to try harder. I'm just going to try something that works better for me and my brain.
Yeah. Oh, and I love what you said
Bring that.
recently on some people get caught up on things like, I got to find the perfect calendar. That'll solve my issues. Where it's like,
Yeah.
it might not be the calendar or the type of physical planner or whatever it is
Yeah.
that is going to solve it. It's probably how you're using it, how you're approaching it. Even just that little mindset shift of it's what's going on in your inner self that's going to make a huge difference, right?
100%. Like I used to be like that with the paper planners. I didn't even mention that. I'd have 3 weeks filled out perfectly, and then I'd never use the rest of the year again. And
Yeah.
just all of that, instead of like for power planning, we use either Google Calendar or iCal. Both are free. If you have a computer, you have access to one of those. It's not like here's this fancy, intricate system, because that's part of the perfectionism. Like we want to have that, like, give me a complicated system so I can be busy learning it instead of actually doing stuff that's scary. So
Yeah.
power planning is really set up in like very simple, very easy process to follow. And it's all designed so that you don't have to be perfect at it. I'm not perfect at it, but doing it imperfectly has you miles ahead of doing the to-do list, doing the paper planner that you abandon. And it's not saying that there's a big issue with all those other things, but I just love sharing, like, I tried that. That really didn't work for me for these reasons. Here's what I've developed. It works for me. It works for my clients. Give it a try as well. So
Right.
yeah. And I love like color-coded calendars and like all of that kind of stuff as well.
Sam, is there anything that you would like to leave people with? And then where can people find you, your work, all that good stuff?
The mantra to bring yourself back to as a perfectionist is ultimately, I know what I'm doing. To just like bring it back, because our brains just go into this like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where to start. Like so much like I don't know. To just try it on for anyone who resonates with it, to just be like, I know what I'm doing, and to have a go at just seeing how that might play out. That's a good example of a simple tweak you can make, just redirecting your brain. Your perfectionist brain wants to be like, I don't know anything. Unless I know something perfectly, I know nothing at all. But to just ground it in, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
In terms of where to find me, so I have a podcast called The Perfectionism Project. Start with the most recent episodes. Perfectionists want to go back to episode 1 and listen to it in order. But I just say, if you love this podcast that you're listening to now and you like podcasts in general, go to mine and just pick a recent episode that jumps out. And I speak in a very similar kind of style. Like I think, if anyone likes this kind of conversation, they'll find that really helpful. So that's the main place that I am sharing and helping people as well. You can find out more about power planning and all of that through the podcast. And then I'm also on Instagram at Perfectionism Project as well.
All right, everyone. I hope that was helpful. Remember, power planning and clean rest and all that does not have to be perfect, and just reevaluate as needed. I'll just share something if it's helpful. I even changed something recently in my own schedule that I, had updated just a few months ago. So I personally find myself changing something every quarter or so. That just seems to be like the rhythm I have. So I had mentioned on an episode with Ricky Lindholm that Wednesday is more of a project day for me. That kind of breaks up my work week a bit. That's when I kind of work on writing projects that don't have as strict of a deadline, things like book proposals and stuff like that. But I found that Fridays for this project day works way better for me, because what I was finding is that I was rushing to complete my work on Friday, the things that actually need to get done and have deadlines, weekly deadlines. So leaving Fridays for project days after the work I actually need to get done is finished by Thursday flows way better for me. And so, if I don't finish a project on a Friday that doesn't really have a true deadline at this time, it's not really a big deal. So sometimes just the placement in our week for something makes a really big difference, because I'm still allotting the same amount of time for everything, but I find that it just flows better, and I actually get things done quicker with just this, simple little adjustment. So, if something is feeling like crap for you, you might just need a really tiny little tweak. You might need to rework something. Maybe the concept that you have is really good for yourself, but you have to place it somewhere different in your week. Maybe it's just a quick mindset shift. And in the spirit of this clean rest concept, I realized that I really want to keep my weekends open for seeing friends and family and doing fun things with my husband, Cam. What I have been doing is I've been allowing kind of like personal tasks to kind of bleed into my weekend quite a bit. Things that I could get done during the week. I'm not going to, stress out about this, but I would love to try to see if it works for me to get things like laundry done on my mornings and evenings during the week, scheduling different personal appointments or whatever it might be, things like that, just a little bit at a time throughout the week. So Saturdays and Sundays, I'm not doing like the house admin stuff so much. And I'm really focusing on just being present, enjoying my time, doing, fun things like that, and saving more of those personal admin tasks for the week. So that's going to be my version of clean rest and what it looks like right now. We'll see if it works. I don't know. And actually, this would tie back to the episode that I did with Molly, all about behavioral change and habit building. That if I start tending to more kind of life admin stuff in evenings during the weekday, that will naturally help me cut down on my TV time. All right, everybody, I hope you have a good rest of the day, and I will talk to you soon. So glad you tuned into Self-Helpless. If you want to go deeper into this topic, check out the list of related conversations linked in today's episode's description. Feel free to share the podcast with anyone who may appreciate the variety of things we discuss here. And if you don't want to miss notifications about new episodes, you can subscribe to Self-Helpless wherever you enjoy podcasts. You can also head to selfhelplesspodcast.com for some free goodies like the Quotable Buffet, the Watch and Read list, and more. All right, love you big time, and thank you so much.